be here today and in this two-day closing conference, and just heading forward because time is quite limited, and about our panel today about moving towards the new normal. So during these last two challenging and dystopic, as previously stated, years, we have seen the cultural and creative sectors reacting, or better responding, in different ways. We've seen many of our peers being stalled completely, facing enormous sustainability issues. And in the same time, we've seen many reinventing themselves, finding new ways to operate, often through the innovative use of digital technologies. We have seen different experiments in all kinds of scale and type, from single user or informal groups to networks and policymakers, trying out new models of work and activation. And we tend to note the success of such experiments because we tend to be optimistic, but it is not clear if they really address the sustainability issues of the sectors, and also, of course, they are not adopted by the majority of our ecosystem. So what about now? It is now the time to start moving towards the new normal. In Creative Flip, but also broadly in our ecosystem, we often discuss the ways out of the crisis. So how to better address challenges and opportunities for the cultural and creative sectors in Europe in this post-pandemic context? Which main lessons to be learned from the disruptions in those two past years from policymakers, networks, as well as intermediary bodies and creatives? And which initiative and new policy answers for a positive transformation become visible? To address these questions, I have here with me today 6 esteemed panel speakers. So I have Magnant from European Commission and DG ECHN, Bernd Fesel from ECBN, the European Creative Business Network, Tere Badia from Cultural Action Europe, Heidemarie Meissnitzer from Cultural Affairs Council Group member, Sheila from Ministry of Culture of Ireland, and of course, Sylvia Amann from Inforelais. So to begin with, I would like Catherine to ask you, Catherine, are you there? Sorry, but I have no visual.
Sitting, hello, hi Vassilis.
Hi, Catherine, nice to have you here today.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you if the European Commission engaged a lot for the cultural and creative sectors during this 2 years crisis, and which are the main lessons learned for a better future for the cultural and creative sectors and for the future role of the culture in Europe.
It's quite an ambitious question, Vassilis. How long do you want me to take? Maybe I can take the floor, I can start, and maybe we can, come back to it. But certainly, one of the lessons learned is the need for flexibility. That's for sure. Anything can happen at any time, and we have to be flexible and reactive. It's not always easy when you manage, EU funding programs. We deal with 27 countries. We deal with so many regions, so many cities, so many partners. So it's, we're not a tiny NGO or creative hub who can really move fast. But that's, I believe, something that has to be improved. Now, what have we done? The crisis hit at a very bad time. It hit at a time when we were at the end of one budget period. In 2020, we were at the end of a so-called 7-year budget period. And it was terrible. We really, really scratched every single barrel, opened every single drawer we could find to try and find some emergency money to be able to do something for the sector. And the most obvious was providing more funds and flexibility. So revising all contracts, being very understanding when projects were writing us and telling us they could not fulfill, what was promised under a certain calendar. Of course, that was obvious. So flexibility was one thing. Finding new, fresh money was very difficult, but we still managed to put together a very big call under Erasmus Plus on partnerships for creativity. And we're very proud of that. In the summer of last year, We managed to find 100 million euros, and for artists who work with schools and educational institutions, to foster creativity. So that was one thing we could do under the Erasmus Plus program. We also launched a few calls, much more modest, under Creative Europe. And the third thing we could do is prepare as well as we could the next budget. So the way it works in the EU is that you work by 7 years and 7 years. You negotiate the budget and the new programs for 7 years. And the crisis hit just at that moment. So I believe that it's thanks to all the work that we all did, all policymakers, but also, the sector wrote to us. You were super active. We managed to get a 60% increase for Creative Europe. We managed to have, that's unheard of. And Creative Europe, as you know, is the main funding program for the EU. We managed to have a separate cluster for culture and cultural heritage and inclusive societies under the research program of Horizon Europe. Again, never done before. We had managed also to get a so-called community innovation knowledge, so a new partnership gathering business, universities, and the sector for the cultural and creative sectors. And that's going to be launched at the end of the year, and that's going to be massive funding. So out of this desperate crisis, we managed to secure a better position for the sector inside the EU funding program. So now the whole issue is to get the money out there, get it fast. By the way, the Creative Europe Cooperation Calls grant is up and running until the 7th of September. So make the best out of it. All those who are listening to us. And one very final point with you, Vassilis, you did it. You set up this Creatives Unite platform, which is amazing. And you did it very fast. And that's honestly, one of the best memories of the very dark crisis, the capacity to respond so fast and to have this platform, which overnight became a success, became accessed by so many sectors and so many creatives. So that's certainly to be remembered. I think I've got to share my speaking time with the other speakers, so I will stop here, even though I've got more to say, but it would be unfair to my co-speakers. So over to you, back to you, Vassilis.
Thank you, Catherine, also for mentioning Creatives Unite, and we'll have opportunity tomorrow to hear more about the platform. But going forward, Bernd, nice to have you here with us. And I wanted to ask you, we're all aware of the huge challenges for the cultural and creative sectors due to this crisis. But as a forward-looking person, do you see any opportunities, and which ones?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, having me end this Czech question. I just feel like Catherine, I could talk for days. But before I touch my topic, I have to say really to Catherine, Creative Europe, with the way you describe it now, with all the funds you generated, it's also an example how public service is flexible, agile, and creative. So in fact, creative turned a little bit like a creative bureaucracy in the very positive sense. And I just want to point out this great festival, which is there. So thanks, I think you also in the name of the whole sector for the fantastic work you have been doing. Now, back to your question, Vassilis. I think first we have to realize post-pandemic is not post-crisis. There will be much more to tackle. It's not that crisis is over. There will be different crises. And we might have to learn that we will never enter a period again, which is like 25 years without crisis, but we will have a recovering, returning iterative experiences with crisis much more than we are used to here, at least in Europe. So if we look at the opportunities we have coming out of this crisis, I think one of the biggest crises is in the sector which has been most hit, the live sector. If it's clubs, cinemas, or museums, or theaters, but only if you really are meant to rebuild it better, if this is not just a phrase, but if you really take it serious and says, rebuilding better is about investing in green transformation, also with the certification, not only the building, also the staff, the personnel, and if it's integrated in the urban development. And I think here the European Union also has created a great step that you can merge the regional development funds better with other funds of the European Union. That would be a great step. The second biggest chance, I think, is in the field of games. Not in the terms of playing games, but using games as a tool to educate, serious games. We all know that we have to be better, have to learn new skills. How do you do this? I think gamification is a great tool to do so. And I also think that the last topic here, in the field of design, as we are now rebuilding so many value chains, moving into the circular economy, I think the whole design sector is a big sector which can grow to enable this inclusion. The new buzzword is inclusive design, and that's especially relevant for mobility. When we come out here of the crisis, we know we might see a new type of personal mobility, and we have also always associated personal mobility with freedom, with social mobility. And in order to assure this again, we have to really be careful that the cheap tickets, the open sky, open Europe, the traveling for the youth, that this is all possible. And that needs to be really, really carefully, purposefully designed. So those are my 3 opportunities: the life sector, gamification, and inclusive design.
Well, that's really interesting, Bernd. But Tere, I would like to hear from you. You're a network, so I would like to know what worked and what did not, and you are close to the voices of the sector. Can you already make a first analysis and priority challenges to be addressed based on the status in this late phase of the pandemic?
Yeah, thank you, Vassilis. Thank you also, Flick, for inviting me and for having me here. Yes, so this is, well, I think the situation, well, you know, the situation of pandemic. Let me challenge, we're not going back to a new normality. I don't know what is normality anymore. And I don't think the normality that we had in mind is something that we 100% want to go back, mostly related to the cultural ecosystem. And on the post-pandemic, so if some authors are talking about syndemics, so I think this should be more profound, that something that is finished and, well, we would simply have to recover. So I think the situation that it was generated by this 2019 already pandemic seems to be a generalized crash test on the limits of the system, specifically on the cultural ecosystem. Well, I don't have to repeat, closure of cultural venues, cultural activities, impossibility to maintain artistic and decent artistic activity. I think this have only amplified in a sort of vertiginous way these different gaps that were already existing in the process of production, in the process of dissemination, transmission of culture and creation of cultural practices. So we work in the intersection of these cultural practices as a network, and we have been in contact with many artists, cultural associations, cultural workers in situations of extreme economic, physical, and psychological precariousness right now. And we think that all these inequalities have multiplied a lot. So we have also one thing that I think is very important is that the loss of this social linkage between the people. So culture is a place where people meet. Culture is something that we do also together, not only alone, but mostly together. So this social linkage, the disappearance of this social linkage can be very, very, critical in a situation that can lead at the end to even more individualistic, more populistic, and more extreme identitarian societies. And therefore, we really think that we need to start transforming these questions to more questions, maybe, because this was a clear indicator that there is a real urgency to generate alternatives to sort of create new networks, new way of productions, new cultural practices. So how we work with them. So things that we have noticed and we know from the conversations with the cultural sector that needs to take urgently in account. And I'm going to be very just mentioning them, maybe we can come back to them afterwards. First, the technology. So we know that technology is here. We learned a lot of technology. So, well, we are already in streaming. So this is here. It's going to stay. But going digital, by going digital, we need to ensure first diversity of contents, diversity of projects that are in internet, but also equality. We are very clear and we know that it's not the same. So not everyone has the same access to technology. Not everyone has the same context and facilities to exceed the technology. So this is something that worries us. And of course, what is behind on artificial intelligence, algorithms and so on, who are analyzing our behavior in the network and our answers. Second, I think it's very important, and we need to take this in account, is the evidence on the interdependence of all the beings. So this crisis has evidence as well, the importance of non-human beings. So I really think that any kind of policy and social should be focused. Policies should be focused in sort of human approach, because this is very important. But we need to consider as well the non-humans in the sense of the interdependence, because this is the context where we live. Then, of course, this evidence of multidisciplinarity. I think the cultural dimension, the inclusion of cultural dimension in this, the force of this speculative approach, it is fundamental to work with the present, to imagine the future. So this is something that is there, and it's absolutely necessary and recognized even by policymakers. So I think this is a good opportunity. Of course, we have seen that there is a danger on the value of the fundamental rights. So movement, Bernd was mentioning this, movement, housing, access, technology, access to culture, access to fair working conditions. And this is another thing that we notice a lot. This has failed. It has failed before. And this pandemic has made it more evident. So I think we need to make a huge effort to better working conditions and to avoid inequalities in the cultural sector. And priority challenges, of course, the sustainability in a holistic approach. I think it's fundamental. So I'm going to leave it here, and maybe we can continue later on.
Thank you very much, Tere. I will go forward. So, Heidemarie, nice to have you here. And I'm really wondering, from the point of view of a policymaker on a national and EU level, what worked and what did not during this period of time?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm also happy to be with you and share with you our experiences. And I think I will share with you some very obvious and very well-known issues, but I think it's important to highlight them again. One was that the cultural and creative sectors, or the artistic world, is very dynamic, very diverse, and is less resilient than we thought. I mean, and that was one very important issue. So the challenge was to know much better the sector in across the country, but across Europe and within the sectors. So there was the structural deficits became more obvious and better known. So the CCS have unorthodox working practices, and they are less anchored in the social security systems, which was disadvantage when developing and finding support measures. Then another thing was that the sector wants to be heard, and not only by the cultural policymakers, but also by the other sectors, like the health sector, when working on measures and especially when reopening. Yeah, this was something also very, very important. And for this, we need very flexible formats, which wasn't the case at the beginning, but this should be taken into consideration in the futures. And the challenge was, of course, uncertainty, but uncertainty was not only for the sector, it was also for the public administrations and all for the policymakers. We had to develop very under huge pressure support programs. And what we did, there was a very dynamic exchange between member states. What are you doing on a horizontal, on a general measures, on the specific measures for the sectors? And of course, at the beginning, it was emergency measures, but now it changes. And what I see is that there is a lot of experience now around. We are still trying to find out what worked and what didn't work. And the challenges are now much more with the implementation, I think. And this is a challenge for the public administration, because we provided a lot of money also on the national level, but also on the European level. But this has to be implemented and this has to be handled. And I think it's not only in Austria the case that we are running out of human resources and we suffer from staff reductions in the public administrations. And so that's also another important issue. So I would say, I see that precarious working conditions are a huge challenge for the future, for the social security system, but there are a lot of things are going on. Soon there is an OMC group starting on this, and this is something very, very important because there is a great variety of working practices and working structures. And I see another key challenge is how do we bring this existing and developed expertise, also what is done by the creative flip into the system, back to the people who need this expertise, because it's really needed and it has to be implemented. And we should also think about this, how this could be done, and we need for this flexible formats. So that's...
Well, Heidemarie, thank you for your input. It's really interesting. But Sheila, I wanted to ask you, the non-standard workers and individual artists were one of the most impacted by the pandemic mitigation measures. How do you see the current status and the support measures related to these groups taken so far?
Hi, everybody, from the most western part of Europe over here on the west coast of Ireland, which makes us, I suppose, a little non-conventional too in terms of Europe. But one of the things that we did here in Ireland, there were many interventions, a bit like Catherine spoke about there as policymakers. There was the kind of immediate response after the shock in March 2020. How do you respond? How do you take on board all of the information around the fact that, you know, there's 55,000 people currently employed in the arts and entertainment sector. There's about 17,000 jobs in the audiovisual sector, and there's 35,000 full-time equivalent employees in the events industry. And all of those can be catered for in big economic impact reports and big investments like the live music investment scheme that our department introduced. But in July, the government announced a wide-ranging suite of measures, which included supports for the programme that I work with, which is called the Creative Ireland programme. And the Creative Ireland programme is about shifting how the culture and creativity sector is embedded in local authorities. That's one of the projects within the Creative Ireland pillar, and I'm responsible for that. So we received funding under the July stimulus, and part of it went to the broadcasting unit within our ministry, where I'm happy to say that we commissioned a piece called Saulu, which was a celebration of people, artists across many genres, music, composers, writers, filmmakers. It employed 106 filmmaking employees and 126 artists. And it's just won the CIRCOM European Association of Regional Television Awards. It was in the Irish language, so it was people in a minority part of the cultural and creative sector who were completely unable to kind of find employment. And then separately, we gave 1.75 million to local authorities, recognizing that local authorities play a leadership role in infrastructure, placemaking, enterprise, culture, community development, all of these sectors. And working collaboratively with them and deploying creativity as a strategy for well-being, we made this investment. And we asked them to broaden the range of supports and disciplines and provide opportunities that weren't intended to duplicate existing available grants, but to reach creatives and creative activities that may not be in a position to readily avail of funding supports. So as you know, there are individuals who maybe operate in their own individual capacity in their studio, or maybe in a socially engaged context where, of course, there was no socially engaged practice. And one of the projects that was delivered was a project called Ardu Cork. Now, even though it's a street art piece, and we've seen it so many times before, it was the context in which this was brought together and the context in which the artists came together and the willingness to be meaningful in the way that they thought about the project. So it wasn't just, can we have a grant so that we can do this? It was a conversation, meaningful conversation at local level to look at the recovery of they themselves as individual artists, but also the learning that we've all talked about as well, and an awareness by the local authority of creatives and their potential to add value within the needs of everybody in this crisis. And I suppose the purpose of this July stimulus investment was not to just continue creating financial relationships with people, but to have enabling, proactive, meaningful relationships that are not just projects for project's sake. And that was the benefit of the investment under the July stimulus package in Ireland. Now, separately, there's a whole other task force that was set up by the Minister with 10 recommendations. I can talk about that later, which has just published its recommendations, one of which is about the basic universal income that Tere was talking about, and that's going to be interrogated now by a working group to deliver it.
Wow, Sheila, really interesting, to be honest, and being so reactive and proactive. It's really impressive. I would like to learn more along the way. But we need to step forward. So Sylvia, very nice to have you back again today. So with innovation out of the crisis, what is the related status and characteristics of innovation support programs related to the relaunch of the cultural and creative sectors in 2020 and spring 21 in the EU?
Thank you, Vassilis, and hello to all of you. Real pleasure to be together, at least in a hybrid format. Yes, in Creative Flip, we took up some of the initiatives, and also based on the new situation then in spring 2020. And we started at that moment to analyze the support programs. So in order to understand better what was the crisis response and in which way it was done, and maybe also to provide already at an early stage information how these programs can be best designed and further developed also in order to best support the sector in this unprecedented crisis. And we are now doing a follow-up in spring 2021, and this follow-up is more focusing on innovation support. So which are new ways out of the crisis and new kind of support programs and what has been done so far. And if we look at the policy answers for so far, we see that it was a slow move towards towards innovation support. So first, it was really that emergency support was extremely important, and innovative tools and new instruments and testing out new support programs was rather the exception at the beginning. And it became very dynamic then in summer 2021, when huge relaunch programs were prepared and then also made public and started to be implemented. And again, with the big shift now in 2021 in spring, where some countries had really a whole range of new systems in place in order to support the sector out of the crisis. Then we analyzed also the different trends related to topics addressed. And there we see again a huge trend towards digital innovation. So to bring further the sector in the whole digital area, quite natural because of the nature of the crisis, a pandemic where you cannot move, where you have social distancing, in order to still bring culture and the arts to the people and to exchange in the sector. Of course, focus was clear and continues now also in the relaunch programs to have a strong digital dimension. But at the same time, of course, we all felt that social cohesion is crucial. And so the policymakers already addressed also this element with this focus on public spaces, also on outdoor events, also new outdoor formats. So there are also programs specifically dedicated to these topics. What was to our surprise a little bit less covered were ecological dimension, because this is the second big crisis we are having already on the table and close to us every day. And also, again, there was this big movement at the beginning of the crisis towards this social cohesion aspect, to be here for the society, to overcome quarantine situations and also related support. But when we look now at the support programs which were already launched, the social dimension is rather the exception than the rule. So we have it here and there, so with new ways also to connect to the audiences, but it's not really kind of big movement we would already detect in the programs. Then in general, we faced more difficulties now in this second phase of analysis to have available data. So while in early summer 2020, yes, we could say literally all policymakers, networks, etc., try to collect information, to provide data, to put it together. This we felt has slowed down, and it's maybe also a little bit a pity, because on the other hand, it would help us also again to go towards advocacy, so that maybe now another way of data collection is needed, but we think still that there needs to be effort because there is also, we perceive a rather big shortcoming of real understanding of the innovative power of the CCS still in many parts outside the CCS. So therefore, this could interlink each one to the other. Then also what we see that still there is a lot of new programs and also will for experimentation, which is very good. Also, for example, to finance a concept phase of a project development, which is of a lot of help for the CCS. But on the other hand, we feel this needs still to be confirmed, but from what we see from the data available now, all these programs seem to have a kind of final date. So it seems to be it's launched now once, but we do less see a kind of long-term structural programs. So this is not the case, of course, for EU funds, which are from 2021 to 2027. But if you look to national programs or local programs. It's often one call. It's not clear if there will be a second call. So we cannot yet predict if this will be a long-term kind of paradigm shift in public support for CCS and in innovation. And then maybe not to become too long, I would still have several points here, but maybe a very last point. We see huge territorial differences inside the EU. Some countries with a lot of efforts, many programs, whole websites only dedicated to a huge number of different funding schemes for probably all creative sectors you can imagine and for all kind of situations. And then other areas or also other governance levels where there is much less engagement. And I think this is also a topic to be further discussed in the future to come up with a more or better territorial balance. Of course, EU funds can play a crucial role in that sense. Yes, but in general, still to stress at the very end the fact unprecedented help still compared to what we have, we could imagine still 1.5 years ago, but also to be recognized unprecedented loss and not fully covered. So this is maybe last word in this round.
Wow. Tremendous input. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for this kind of analysis of the situation. Unfortunately, I think we do not have more time to go through questions. Am I correct? Maybe someone from the organizers can help us and tell us if we have a bit more time, but I think not. Okay, so we have a bit of time. Okay, that's great. I thought we didn't. That is great. So we have several questions coming in from many people. So many are addressing towards Catherine. So I would definitely, Catherine, want to ask you first, how will you ensure Erasmus Plus will be implemented with the same flexibility on the national level as it was designed in the special call? That was one question that was coming in. But also I would like to add up to this one. And what will you do for the smaller organizations that most probably will fail applying, which is a common scenario also in the past, but now is more important also to facilitate their needs. So these are the two first questions coming in. Catherine?
Yes, with pleasure. Look, I will leave Erasmus Plus aside because it's not the main funding program for the cultural and creative sectors. The main funding program, I mean, I did mention this extraordinary call, but that's one thing, right? The main entry point for the cultural and creative sectors is Creative Europe. It is totally designed for the sector. And here we introduced two big changes in the new program, which is going to last 7 years, in order to be more accessible to smaller organizations. The main change was to ask less co-funding money. Everyone who, or every organization or group of organizations who applies for funding for Creative Europe has to come up with matching funds. It used to be 40%, it's now 20%. It's been really lowered to facilitate the access of the cultural and creative sectors to the funds, to ease their possibility to present projects. So that's one thing. Then we introduced, before we had smaller projects, big projects, and that's it. We now introduce 3 sizes of possible partnerships. They remain still big. We are totally aware of that. And there are many small organizations at the national or local level who cannot apply. But maybe then the EU funding, they should turn towards, regional or local funding or national funding. The EU funds are designed for partnerships between organizations from several countries. That's the whole purpose, right? I mean, they are European, at European level. The whole purpose is to allow the sector those sectors to work together between countries. So by nature, they're a bit big. They are not tiny funding, and that's their nature. That's the added value. So that's a very important, that two things we did. So just to come back to what I said, we lowered the level of amount of money that was needed for the sectors to apply, and we introduced a medium range size of project. It remains that, unfortunately, Creative Europe is, like all EU funding programs, is very competitive. We receive far more proposals than we can fund, far more. It's very sad. It breaks our heart when we, assess projects. But that's, in the past, we could fund between 10 to 15% of the project that we received. So many good projects were left aside. We just have too many applicants. Let's see what will happen with the new with the next calls, which I repeat, by the way, are open now. You have until the 7th of September to send us proposals under the Creative Europe cooperation calls.
Thank you, Catherine, for your important input. And of course, the new Creative Europe structure is so important. And lowering the co-financing is important for small companies. So that's a radical change for the program. So Bernd, I think that you already mentioned it, but because we have it coming in as a question, I would love to know and maybe further elaborate a bit in what is the new normal. Is it post-pandemic or post-crisis?
Yeah, again, the new normal. First of all, what was the normal we were starting from? If you go back about a year, we had two hidden big transformations, which were under the lid, pushing us forward to system changes, but not really realizing and embracing those system changes as we are doing it now. This is the green transformation, and it's the digital transformation. And I think with the European Green Deal, it is more than accidents, that this came together with the pandemic, which now from the pandemic sides call for a system change. So if you look into like the carbon footprint of housing, which is 40%, or if you look at the food, which is thrown away, all those big figures. So I think the next years we will see as a new normal this necessity to rebuild and change value chains, to have a really system change in many parallel markets and social fields. This also relates to the topic of social security, the self-employed. Tere has been speaking about the diversity in income. So all these things, somehow it seems as if we have to address them all at the same. And this is something policy was not used to. It usually said, okay, first you do this, then you do this, and this here can wait also another 10 years. But now I think we have this feeling that there's an urgency to do it all in one. And that's why I'm really hesitant to speak of a new normal, because there will be something new, but I hesitate to call that normal because it will be really difficult, exhausting. Somebody said it here, we're missing staff to do this. And also public services, have to increase their capacity and grow and have to be better staffed to handle all this. So I would say, yes, the new is a constant parallel system change. I hesitate to call it normal, and in my forward-looking positive attitude, I call it a renaissance. This is kind of a renaissance in the making, but that's only the positive view on it. You could also say it's a revolution which takes a lot of strain on everybody, also on a personal level.
Yep. Thank you, Bernd. I always like this renaissance idea. You've been mentioning a lot lately. So maybe Tere or Sheila could also contribute, because we have a question coming in that I think you could both kind of contribute. And if we really want to move forward and include all the independent makers, we should have some form of social security for them. And what are we going to do? This is the question. Sheila, I think you kind of addressed that.
Yeah. I suppose a bit like what Bernard said, you know, the idea of a basic universal income has been lobbied by the National Campaign for the Arts in Ireland for a long time. But the conditions now and the urgency are, I suppose, that's the benefit of the mature conversations that are happening, which is that this is now going to be piloted within Ireland for the arts, culture, audiovisual live performance and event sector. So it was one of the 10 recommendations in the task force, the Arts and Culture Task Force Recovery Report, and our minister has just convened an oversight group and has got it into the National Economic Recovery Plan that was published on the 1st of June. So it's not just an ambition, it's now embedded into a commitment, the political will is there, and the structure and the format of it will build on what's been done in Finland, what's been done in the Netherlands, what's been done in other countries. And it is basically, it's defined as an unconditional state payment that each citizen receives, and the payment is designed to provide enough to cover the basic cost of living and a modicum of financial security. All other income would then be earned separately and subject to taxation. The scheme will be opt-in, and it'll be piloted, as I said, for 3 years. So again, even though it's an immediate, or it's been a conversation that's been ongoing, it's now a definitive action in the programme for government with a commitment by our minister.
Great, Sheila. So Tere, maybe you could also tell us a bit also what is next and which cultural policy actions on EU level are now to be prioritized, and how can and will the European cultural networks engage the next months to come? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, no. Yeah, a bit following of what was said, what Sheila was saying, and what Bernd was also saying, and the question regarding the new normal and the working conditions. Yes, I think one of the main targets or main challenges for the next years is going to be to tackle these working conditions. So that's why we are convinced that a European, it is needed in the sort of a European framework for working conditions for artists and cultural workers, because they do have very specific working conditions if they have any. But we think that if we could advance in this European framework, sort of creating a sort of standards of working conditions for artists and cultural workers, it will include directly also and other sort of workers that are appearing also over there in the scope. Another urgency that we think it's as soon as possible recovering the mobility, because it's not only fundamental freedom, but for the cultural sector, this is fundamental for living. The cultural sector, cultural practices needs mobility. So this is something that is very, very urgent. And we think that we need specific plan also to a safe reopening of culture. In recent studies, I think it was Ernst & Young, I think that trends are from the consumers, so from people, participants, public, in that are wishing to go back to see theater, to participate in festivals and so on. They're not that good. So 46% of respondents said that they would not feel comfortable going to a concert for several months. So I think we need to really plan a safe reopening of culture and cultural venues and festivals and so on. So this is a serious situation, and it has been 1 year already, or more than 1 year, without culture in public spaces or in venues. So I think this is not only I think, so also our members and the conversation with other cultural agents and organizations says that this is a real urgency. And of course, another very, very important thing is to ensure this diversity. We were talking about diversity before. This is there. We need to ensure that the digital domain doesn't eat all the diversity that should be there. we really have to have a critical approach on the technology. Digitization, it's very important. It's in our life, it's going to be there, but it's not neutral and it's not carbon neutral. So we have to be very, very aware on this, because we cannot push to technology everything that we haven't done in the physical world. So we need to approach technology and digital in a very critical way under this green or this really sustainable approach. So this is very, very important. Yeah. Also, of course, we would love to see the Commission assessing closer to the recovery funds that the countries, the member states has presented. We can see also territorial differences. Some of the countries they want to invest a lot. Some of them they do not want to invest a lot in culture. So we think that the Commission could assess a bit and could follow a bit the investment in culture. Across these recovery funds. And that's why we propose this also to start thinking, not only in a Green Deal and in this supporting this to green transformation, but in a sort of cultural deal, a cultural deal where culture is also mainstream, where culture is also a pillar for sustainable development. Not only the economical, the social and the environmental pillars are important, but the cultural one is crucial there, because it crosses everything that we do and how we see the world. And I will stop here because I'm talking too much, sorry.
Well, Tere, thank you for your amazing input. We are all worried about our peers, and especially for those that are completely stalled right now. So it's really important mentioning those things. And of course, mentioning the RRF, this is really, really important. And we are all really skeptical on a local and global level about it. So again, thank you for your contribution. And I would like Heidemarie to ask you, we have this question coming up. In Austria, you launched a wider range of new support programs, including new formats and new ways of financing the cultural and creative sectors. Why did you experiment with these specific programs, and how do you achieve long-term impacts?
Indeed, we launched a variety of support measures, especially, and at the beginning it was a focus on emergency measures concerning the labor market, compensation for losses in running costs, and also the social security. And then we started with much more tailor-made measures and specific calls. And they are focusing on topics like audience development and in investing in technical equipment, because there, of course, there was a shift to online projects, so from the stage to the video. And but there are also incentives for a greener cultural sector, and also and for the digital shift. And Sylvia mentioned it. We recently launched a support measure. It's a with two phases, and also the conceptual phase is already granted money. And I think this is really something new. But we make the same experience as the European Union. There is not enough money. We got a huge, almost 600 applications, and I think what I have heard, there will be money for around 70 or 80 projects. So the interest is much bigger than the funds, but at least it's a starting point. And of course, Sylvia mentioned it. It's not yet for sure if this is within deadline, and or hopefully this will be something ongoing in the future. And I think what we should learn, I don't know if it's the new normal. We should use this as an opportunity as a window of opportunity for transformation, and use the analysis and the experience which is on the table. And
So Sylvia, what are the main recommendations from the recent Creative Flip study to better use innovation to support the creative and cultural sectors out of the crisis? And why do you stress the fact that innovation is a related central topic?
Maybe I come back first to a more general question, because you ask also about the new normal and is there a new normal? I think it was already a kind of something imaginated that there was a static normal of something. So I would even question this notion of normal, because what is normal? And I think life is permanent transformation, and sometimes it's small shifts, sometimes it's incremental. And now we experienced, at least in Europe for a longer time, again, something bigger, more disruptive. And so we have the feeling that our normal has been changed. But I think it was never there. So it was only imagined. So in that sense, I think we should understand that transformation is normal, and adaptation, or also imagine the future and how we could adapt to it. It's something we need to do always. And therefore, I think it's also now crucial, even more crucial than maybe in other phase of our recent European development in maybe 20th century, end of 20th century, where we felt in a more comfortable situation. Now we have to think more and go further. And I think Tere also mentioned a crucial element. It's this element of mobility and how to reconnect together. I think it's also related to the fact that we have to answer to many crises, and we cannot answer alone to these. So we have to meet, we have to exchange, we have to find formats in order to do so. And this, of course, relates to some philosophical questions. How should that be? It relates also to carbon footprint, how our framework are. And of course, we need also to survive as a sector. So it relates also to business models, earning models, etc. So I think these are big questions, and therefore maybe for the recommendations, I would mainly state two here now. I think it would need really, together at the table, a broad strategic thinking. So also to see what could be the different scenarios, in which direction could we go, and then also to answer also with longer innovation programs. So where really we can experiment, we can try out, and we give also then again, in this sense, it's important, a stable framework for the sector to work. This is something different from kind of normal, new normal. Yeah. And then maybe a second thing, I have the experience in many of these studies that there are two levels which needs to be taken into consideration. Of course, the capacities of the sector, and these can be quite different. But I think we should more speak now in the future also about innovation inside administrations, because I perceive it for many years as one of the bottlenecks. There is a lot of will also at many operative levels to change things, to move towards a better frameworks. But on the other side, there is a lack of political understanding and also a lack of political backing. Because when you want to do, for example, new public procurement procedures related to creative, innovative or green public procurement, it's not one operative official somewhere in a department who can easily implement something like that. It's a risky endeavor. And so it needs on the other side this political backing, and also to prepare public administrations also in the sense of training, also to have all the capacities which are needed for these new forms also of programs, for example. So, and then of course we need a broad notion of innovation. We need also relaunch debate related to new forms of public-private partnership with discussed that already this morning, how to better engage with the public sector, with corporate social responsibility activities. But I'm getting too long and it's getting too much. And I stop here, but still I think a lot of things to be brought forward. And I think many also ways are already on the table. Now it's up to us really to go ahead and to bring it forward, and maybe not to get sleepy with a kind of discourse of now we are in the new old normal.
Yes, Bernd?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to take this prompt, Sylvia. You know, this topic of innovation in public services, or creative bureaucracies, as we say. Here in Germany, we have a big election coming up, and for the first time, I can remember, like in 20 years, all parties are speaking not only of a system change in population, education, or system change in the economy, but also of a new start within government. So one of the learnings from this pandemic, at least in Germany, was that governments have to do things differently or better. And I hope this really prevails, because I also think it's a big bottleneck. And indeed, public procurement is really the holy grail. Yeah, to touch this in policy is like hot water. And to make this a routine would be a fantastic thing. And I think also that a lot of artists, entrepreneurs, even startups could be fostered if public procurement is more open to our sector. Yeah.
Since you're stepping in, Bernd, another question coming in for you is if there is a connection between the new Renaissance, as you name it, and the European Bauhaus initiative, and will that bring the sector forward and bring more attention?
Well, this is predicting the future, but I think if we look at the last 12 months or 8 months, we saw that with the initiative of the new European Bauhaus, there has been much more attention across classical media also for the cultural creative industries and its relation to those great transformations. It has been here said earlier that still the creative industries and its innovation, I think Sylvia said that, is undervalued in its potential for the great transformations. And I think the new Bauhaus really put this on the agenda, and I think it will stay there for at least the next 5 years, because there will be those large-scale demonstrator projects across different cities and nations. I would rather pose the question again, as Creative Europe also tried it, how do we enable the public procurement not only to make large-scale demonstrator, but also small-scale demonstrators, you know, across the diversity of the sector? But when I understood this high-level advisory board right, they're exactly thinking on this, how to take the new European Bauhaus into a co-creation, as it is now already, into a co-production field. I think the signs are really set good for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Bernd. Well, another question that was coming in for you, Bernd, but I want to address to all of you actually, because it's something that's coming back stronger and stronger. We have kind of two types, as we perceive, of cultural and creative stakeholders. So we have from the one side, the ones completely stalled, but we have also some that are becoming more stronger through this last period of time. So we have two poles that are kind of acting separately. Is there a way, do you think there is a way to cross-link those two poles and make them function together? I think we have briefly discussed about this topic, Bernd, in the past. But I would like actually to hear from all of you, because I think this is a really puzzling question, at least for me. I don't know if Tere, you want to contribute. Whomever you like, you can step in.
So, yeah, I can say something that, as I said, the task force in Ireland had 10 recommendations, including public space and the enhancement of public space for the creative sector, so that, you know, when things do come back, that it's going to be easier to provide space and opportunity. And so that was, you know, capital, not just revenue. And then similarly, there was protecting livelihoods, but whose livelihoods and at what level? So the bigger sector, like the live industry scheme, as I said to you, the live music industry scheme, 25 million was just given out last week, and it still wasn't enough. Like everybody has said, oversubscribed. The ask was 80 million. The budget was 25 million. But I think what Sylvia was saying there is important, that, you know, transformation or the opportunity for change always exists. And this disruption, even though it's not a welcome one, it still has potential. And if we've identified the gaps now, often you're like, mind the gap, you know, for fear that feeling that you might like step into the gap. But now we've said, no, let's find the gaps and let's look at them head on, and look at them in Ireland as well. We looked across all policy areas. So not just culture, but health and education, enterprise, and the Creative Ireland programme specifically is an all of government programme. So we're not saying we're the source and the only source. We're saying, if we're talking about well-being, well, then how does our health system buy into creativity as part of people's well-being? If we're talking about young people and diversity or children, you know, how do we get that department? So we've been doing that, and we've been trying to bring the gaps together and network the networks, because networking is about building relationships and it's about giving. And I think there has been a generosity in this process, in this disruptive process, of people willing to share ideas. Look at us all here today. I don't think I've been to as many European conferences in my whole life as I have during the pandemic, which is wonderful. And I was at the Creative Bureaucracy, the first one, the Creative Bureaucracy Festival in Berlin. I love the idea of creative bureaucrats. I just love it. I have the sash and everything. But I suppose we need the leadership now that has been empowered to be sustained in the public service, and take those meaningful conversations and pace them and make them purposeful, and continue to make them purposeful, and no going back. I know when I was involved in the bid for Limerick European Capital of Culture, and even though we didn't win, it became the baseline for the conversation, and the mindset changed around the power of culture to transform. And so therefore, you know, in a way, you felt your work was done because you had changed the conversation. So the conversation has changed, we know that, but let's make it mutually beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I completely agree with Sheila and also with Sylvia. I think this proposal of strategic thinking based in the work of stable framework. So I think this is fundamental. Well, how to bring them together? So I think we have diverse approaches here. One of them is to continue, which is important. I'm not saying that it's not important. I think it's very important to continue with sectorial policies because there are sectors there. But I think we need to start including also the vectorial policies, so the vectors, so culture as vectors. And here I think we will need more holistic and more approaches. And of course, it would be very, very good if the cultural agents are also present in the conversations on where you take decisions on health, environment, etc. So this vectorial approach of this cultural dimension, I think this is fundamental, and this is cross-cutting. So it crosses all the sectors, all the cultural sectors, but also the educational sector, health sector, social sector, so policy, economy. So this is to open these discussions and to invite cultural agents to these discussions, not only the ones representing the sectorial approaches, which is very important, but also the ones that are representing also this vectorial approach, this cultural dimension. And of course, the networks here, I think we have not only a role, but a responsibility to try to open these spaces of dialogue because it is fundamental that we have been working together with diverse sectors of the cultural ecosystem. Some of them are a bit better than others that are completely destroyed. And I think to maintain and to open this dialogue and to see that this is a network, is not a mere sum of agents, but a place where to discuss and where to find these tensions, the diversity. This is a fundamental responsibility. We have also this responsibility in mind when approaching not only our members but also other cultural stakeholders that are not members of Culture Action Europe, but we are working horizontally with them very intensively.
Thank you, Tere, for your input. I don't know, Catherine, do you have any final words?
So much was said. I mean, for me, what's very important, I mean, is that, you know, I mean, we've worked on business models, value chains, etc. I mean, that work has been done and has to continue. And we have to see whether things have changed indeed. For me, the most important now at European level is to really continue opening that door and exploring the working conditions of artists. That was a topic which was not on the agenda. It is now on the agenda. And unfortunately, you know, what we can do at European level is limited. Why? Because social issues like culture are for national governments. Only national governments can take legislation and can decide. It's very important to know, you know, we have no magic wand there. We cannot decide that all artists will have a basic income. We can't. Impossible. We just can't. But what we can do is bring countries together and have ministries talk to each other and see how they reacted to the crisis. And that's exactly what Sheila was saying for Ireland. Ireland looked, I mean, first recognized the issue, then also looked at what other countries like Finland, the Netherlands had done. But I mean, you had the idea yourself as well, and you decided to experiment this, you know, scheme that you described which is similar to some sort of a basic income, if I got you right. And these kind of experiments and new approaches, we want to bring people around the table from ministries of culture and ministries of social affairs and discuss them. And that's something we're going to start as of September. It requires time, but we really, I mean, it will go on through the whole of next year, but we really hope it will be a very rich learning moment, because we really need to do something when it comes to the working conditions of artists, social security, taxes at the national level, but also when crossing the boundaries of the EU, because artists are mobile. Artists need to tour, and that raises many issues for them of compatibility of social security system, compatibility, or rather incompatibility of tax system. Those issues are very complicated, but hopefully we can help a little bit, and that work will be set in motion as of September with the ministries. In the meantime, we have done a big study to prepare the work. That's what the Commission did. And tomorrow we will have a dialogue with the sector to listen to what they have to tell us, the main messages they want to give us. It will be a big roundtable of over 40 organizations really on the working conditions of artists. So I believe, in a way, it's the new frontier. I mean, we need to continue working on funding, on innovation, on new business models, but that was already on the track in a way. Working conditions of artists is really a new topic at EU level. Thank you, Vassilis.
Thank you, Catherine, for your input. Bernd, you wanted to comment on something?
Yeah, thank you, Vassilis. I just wanted to take up another aspect of this debate on how the strong can help the weak. And it's, of course, not a topic limited to the cultural creative sectors. It's a wider topic we have in general in society. And usually society and policy is solving this, this inequality by providing certain incentives, if it's with a tax scheme or if it's tax deduction schemes. And if you look at our society today, we see that private capital is growing and growing and growing, and the incentives to invest it are basically limited to the stock market. You will now see that the European Union is setting up a regulation on the certification of green bonds, so that there is a new framework to invest all this private venture capital more into sustainable investments at the stock market. But what would happen if regulations would also give a tax advantage if you invest substantially in artists or in institutions, in libraries as a private entrepreneur? And you had this, I know this from experience, limited to the art market in the United States some 15 years ago. And so I would also propose, look into the frameworks, cultural frameworks for tax deductions, not only as we have it now for film or games, but also for performing arts and many others, which are having a rendite, a payoff, not so much in the market, but in social cohesion. And I think there is still a lot to do framing venture capital investments in culture.
I think this kind of ideas have been a long time debate, but now it's the time, maybe the opportunity to address all these kind of ideas. But before closing, I want to tell you that one question that has been showing up is how we can integrate more into the programs of other sectors. And this makes sense because we have limited budget and limited amounts allocated directly towards our sectors. But of course, we have many relevant themes that we can work with, like, for example, innovation, so programs like Horizon and other DGs. But I think that this question, we don't have the answer to answer it right now, but it's a really nice lead-in for the next conversation, the next panel coming up in 15 minutes time, the So You Need Money panel discussion or access to finance. So I think we have to finish up and wrap it up here. Has been a really interesting session, so thank you all for contributing, and hope to see you really, really soon again. Take care.